Sarah Jenkins walked through the busy halls of Atlanta General Hospital, her white nurse's shoes making soft squeaking sounds against the polished floor. It was another ordinary Tuesday morning in April, or at least that's what she thought. At 32 years old, Sarah had grown used to her routine. Wake up at 5 a.m., arrive at the hospital by 6:30 a.m., and begin her rounds by 7 a.m. sharp. As she approached room 407, she glanced down at her chart. The patient was new. Michael Thompson, aged 34, admitted for pressure sore treatment. Sarah knocked gently on the door before entering, expecting to find yet another frustrated patient. Instead, she was greeted by a warm smile that made her pause for a moment. Michael sat in his wheelchair near the window, sunlight streaming in behind him. He wore a simple blue t-shirt and black sweatpants, his legs covered with a light blanket. What caught Sarah's attention wasn't his wheelchair or his condition. It was the stack of computer programming books on his bedside table and the laptop balanced perfectly on his portable desk. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," Sarah said, pushing her shoulder-length black braids behind her ear. "I'm Sarah, and I'll be your nurse during the day shift." "Please call me Michael," he replied, his brown eyes twinkling with friendliness. "Unless you want me to call you Nurse Jenkins all day." Sarah couldn't help but laugh. Most patients didn't bother reading her name tag, let alone try to make conversation. "Sarah is fine," she said, moving closer to check his vital signs. As she worked, Michael continued typing on his laptop. "Are you working on something interesting?" Sarah asked, noticing complex lines of code on his screen. "Just trying to make the world a little better, one line of code at a time," Michael answered. "I'm developing software that helps people with disabilities navigate public spaces more easily. You know, finding the most accessible routes, locating working elevators, that kind of thing." Sarah raised her eyebrows, impressed. Most of her patients who were newly disabled often struggled with depression and anger. But Michael seemed different. He was using his experience to help others. "How long have you been coding?" she asked while checking his blood pressure. "Since college," Michael replied. "The accident 2 years ago didn't change that. If anything, it gave me a new purpose for my skills." Over the next hour, as Sarah treated his pressure sore and helped him with his routine, they talked about everything from their favorite pizza toppings — they both loved pineapple on pizza, a controversial choice they defended proudly — to their families. Sarah learned that Michael had a younger sister in California and parents who lived just outside Atlanta. He was born and raised in Georgia, just like her. "Your turn," Michael said as Sarah changed his bandages. "Tell me about your family." Sarah told him about her mother, a high school teacher, and her younger sister who was studying to become a chef. She mentioned her father's passing 5 years ago and how her mother had raised them to be strong, independent women. "Sounds like she did a great job," Michael commented. "Not everyone would choose to become a nurse. It takes a special kind of person to care for others day after day." Sarah felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. There was something about Michael that made her feel comfortable, despite having just met him. He didn't treat her like just another nurse, and he didn't act like just another patient. Before leaving the room, Sarah checked his chart one final time. "I'll be back in a few hours to check on you," she said, heading toward the door. "I'll be here," Michael replied with a grin. "Not like I can run away." His ability to joke about his condition caught Sarah off guard, making her laugh again. As she left room 407, Sarah realized something had changed. The ordinary Tuesday morning didn't feel so ordinary anymore. Walking back to the nurse's station, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about Michael's warm smile and quick wit. She had met hundreds of patients over her 8-year nursing career, but something about Michael Thompson was different. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of a story that would change both their lives forever. Over the next 3 months, Sarah found herself looking forward to her shifts at Atlanta General Hospital more than ever before. Even though Michael had been discharged after 2 weeks, he kept coming back for his regular checkups, and somehow, those appointments always seemed to fall during her shifts. One warm July afternoon, Sarah sat in the hospital cafeteria during her lunch break, picking at her salad while her best friend and fellow nurse, Lisa, watched her with knowing eyes. "Girl, just admit it," Lisa said, stealing a cherry tomato from Sarah's plate. "You're falling for him." Sarah looked around nervously, making sure no one could hear them. "It's not that simple, Lisa. We're just friends." But they were more than just friends, and Sarah knew it. Every time Michael came for his checkups, they would talk for hours. He would bring her coffee from her favorite shop, remembering exactly how she liked it. 1 sugar, extra cream. They had even exchanged phone numbers, and their late-night text conversations had become the highlight of her days. However, Sarah's mother, Patricia Jenkins, had other thoughts about the situation. That evening, when Sarah visited her mother's house for their weekly dinner, the topic came up again. "Baby," Patricia said, stirring her famous pot of gumbo, "I'm just worried about you. Being a caregiver is your job, not your life. Have you thought about how hard it would be?" Sarah put down her glass of iced tea harder than she meant to. "Mama, Michael is more than his wheelchair. He's brilliant, funny, and he treats me better than any man I've ever dated. I just want what's best for you," her mother sighed. "Life is already hard enough for a black woman in this world. Why make it harder?" "Because love isn't about making life easier, Mama," Sarah replied softly. "It's about finding someone who makes the hard times worth it." Meanwhile, across town, Michael was having his own struggles. Sitting in his adapted apartment, he stared at his phone, reading through his messages with Sarah. His younger sister, Rachel, was visiting from California and watched him with concern. "You haven't asked her out yet, have you?" Rachel asked, sitting cross-legged on his couch. Michael shook his head. "How can I? What kind of life can I offer her, Rach? She deserves someone who can dance with her at parties, who can go hiking with her on weekends." Rachel threw a cushion at him. "Stop being stupid, big brother. That woman lights up like a Christmas tree every time she sees you, and you're not exactly subtle about how you feel either." The next day, Sarah was checking her emails at the nurse's station when Michael appeared in the hallway. He was wearing a nice button-down shirt instead of his usual casual clothes, and he held a small bouquet of yellow daisies, Sarah's favorite flowers. "Michael?" Sarah said, surprised to see him. "You don't have an appointment today." "I know," he replied, his voice slightly shaky. "I'm here to ask you something else." He moved his wheelchair closer to the desk, taking a deep breath. "Would you like to go on a date with me? A proper one, not just coffee in the hospital cafeteria." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Around them, other nurses pretended not to listen, but she could see them smiling. "Yes," she said, without hesitation. "I would love to." Michael's face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. "Friday at 7, I know a great restaurant that makes amazing Thai food." As Sarah accepted the flowers, she noticed Lisa giving her a thumbs up from across the hallway. She didn't care about her mother's concerns or what anyone else might think. In that moment, all that mattered was the joy in Michael's eyes and the warmth spreading through her chest. That evening, when Sarah called her younger sister Jessica to tell her about the date, Jessica squealed with excitement. "Finally! You know what, sis? Sometimes the best love stories are the ones that make other people uncomfortable. They're the ones that challenge what people think is normal or practical." As Sarah got ready for bed that night, she looked at the yellow daisies sitting in a vase on her nightstand. She realized that sometimes the biggest barriers weren't physical ones. They were the ones people built in their minds. And breaking through those barriers, that was the first step towards something beautiful. 6 months into their relationship, Michael and Sarah had fallen into a comfortable routine. Every Friday was date night, Sundays were spent with their families, and they made time to see each other at least 3 other days during the week. People at the hospital had gotten used to seeing Michael visit Sarah during her lunch breaks, always bringing her favorite snacks or just coming to make her laugh after a hard morning. One chilly October evening, Michael seemed unusually nervous when he picked Sarah up from her apartment. He kept checking his phone and adjusting his collar, which made Sarah wonder what was going on. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked as they drove toward what Michael had said was just their regular date night. "Everything's perfect," Michael replied, though his voice cracked slightly. "Just perfect." Instead of heading to their usual restaurant, Michael's adapted van turned toward the Atlanta Botanical Gardens. Sarah raised her eyebrows in surprise. They hadn't been here since their third date, when she had pushed his wheelchair through the flower-lined paths and they had talked until the gardens closed. "The gardens? At night?" Sarah asked, curious about why they were going there after dark. "They're doing a special light show," Michael explained, but he couldn't quite meet her eyes. "I thought it would be nice." When they arrived, Sarah noticed something strange. The parking lot was almost empty. As she helped Michael into his wheelchair, a familiar face appeared from behind a nearby tree. "Jessica," Sarah said, surprised to see her younger sister there. "What are you doing here?" Jessica just smiled mysteriously. "Follow me," she said, holding a small basket of rose petals, which she began scattering along the path. As they moved through the gardens, Sarah gasped. The trees were wrapped in thousands of tiny white lights, creating a magical glow all around them. Soft music played from hidden speakers. It was At Last by Etta James, the song they had first danced to in Michael's living room, with Sarah sitting in his lap as they swayed to the music. They reached a beautiful gazebo decorated with more lights and flowers. Sarah's heart began to race as she recognized more familiar faces standing around it. Her mother, who was crying and smiling at the same time, Michael's parents and sister Rachel, and Lisa from the hospital holding a camera. "Michael," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Michael moved his wheelchair to face her, reaching for her hand. "Sarah Jenkins," he began, his voice full of emotion, "the day you walked into my hospital room was the day my life changed forever. Not because I needed a nurse, but because I met the woman who would show me that love has no boundaries." He pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "People think I'm brave for how I handled my accident, but the truth is, you're the brave one. You loved me without hesitation, fought for us when others doubted, and showed me that what makes a relationship special isn't what we can or cannot do. It's how we feel about each other." Sarah felt tears rolling down her cheeks as Michael opened the box, revealing a beautiful diamond ring. "I may not be able to get down on one knee," he said with a small smile, "but I can promise you my heart, my trust, and my endless love. Sarah Jenkins, will you marry me?" For a moment, Sarah couldn't speak. She looked at the ring, at Michael's hopeful face, at their families watching with joy, and at the beautiful scene he had created. Then she did something that surprised everyone. She sat down on his lap, wrapped her arms around his neck, and whispered, "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Their families burst into applause and cheers. Patricia Jenkins, who had once worried about her daughter's choice, was now wiping away tears of joy. "I was wrong," she said, hugging them both. "This is exactly what's best for you." As Michael slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger, Jessica started playing their song again. Sarah leaned her head against Michael's shoulder, and they swayed gently in his wheelchair, lost in their own world. "I love you," Michael whispered in her ear. "Thank you for showing me that true love doesn't see disabilities, it sees possibilities." Sarah looked at her ring, then at her fiancé, and smiled through her tears. "No, thank you for showing me that when you find the right person, everything else is just details." As their families gathered around to celebrate, the lights in the garden seemed to shine even brighter, as if nature itself was celebrating their love. This was just the beginning of their journey together, and both Sarah and Michael knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The months following Michael and Sarah's engagement were filled with both excitement and challenges. Wedding planning, they quickly discovered, was complicated enough without having to consider wheelchair accessibility for every venue they visited. But Sarah was determined to make their special day perfect, not just for them but for everyone attending. One Saturday morning, Sarah, her sister Jessica, and Michael's sister Rachel sat in a cozy bridal shop, surrounded by white dresses of all styles and sizes. Sarah stood in front of a mirror, wearing her 5th dress of the day. "That's it," Jessica exclaimed, clapping her hands. "Turn around, sis." The dress was elegant but simple, a flowing white gown with delicate lace sleeves. What made it perfect wasn't just how it looked, but how easily Sarah could move in it. She would need to help Michael throughout the day, and a complicated dress would only make things harder. "Michael won't be able to take his eyes off you," Rachel said, wiping away a tear. "Though that's nothing new. He already can't." While the women were dress shopping, Michael was at his physical therapy appointment. He hadn't told Sarah, but he had doubled his therapy sessions in recent months. His therapist, Dr. Martinez, was helping him with a special surprise for the wedding, one that made every painful session worth it. "Looking good, Michael," Dr. Martinez said as Michael completed another set of exercises. "Just remember, this is our secret until the big day." Later that afternoon, Sarah and Michael met with their wedding planner, Maria, at their chosen venue, a beautiful garden with a newly installed wheelchair ramp. Maria had experience planning accessible weddings, which made her perfect for them. So, Maria said, checking her clipboard. We've arranged for all tables to be at the right height for Michael's wheelchair. The dance floor will be completely level, and we've made sure all paths are wide enough. Now, about the seating arrangement. Sarah watched as Michael discussed the details with Maria. She loved how he never saw his wheelchair as a barrier, just something they needed to work around. His positive attitude had changed not just his life, but hers too. That evening, they had dinner at Patricia's house. Sarah's mother had completely changed her attitude since the engagement. Now, she was their biggest supporter, even taking cooking classes to learn how to make Michael's favorite dishes. Have you decided on the wedding cake? Patricia asked, serving them her famous sweet potato pie. 3 tiers, Sarah replied. And Michael found a baker who can make it look like books stacked on each other, for all those hours we spent talking about books in his hospital room. Michael squeezed Sarah's hand under the table. Don't forget the best part. The top tier is pineapple flavored. You two and your pineapple obsession, Jessica laughed, shaking her head. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of decisions. Flowers, yellow daisies, of course. Music, a mix of classic love songs and modern hits. And the guest list, intimate, but not too small. Every decision they made reflected both their love story and their practical needs. One challenge came when they went to choose their wedding rings. The jeweler initially seemed uncomfortable, watching Michael struggle to try on rings. But Michael's humor quickly broke the ice. Well, at least we know I won't lose it playing basketball, he joked, making everyone laugh. As their wedding day approached, Sarah noticed Michael spending more time at physical therapy and making mysterious phone calls. When she asked about it, he just smiled and said, everyone needs a few secrets before their wedding day. One night, about 2 weeks before the wedding, Sarah found Michael looking at old photos on his laptop. Pictures from before his accident, when he could walk. Do you miss it? She asked softly, sitting beside him. Michael turned to her with a gentle smile. Sometimes, but then I remember that if I hadn't been in that wheelchair, I might never have met you, and that makes it all worth it. Sarah leaned down to kiss him, knowing in her heart that she had made the right choice. Their wedding wouldn't be like others, but that's what made it special. It would be uniquely theirs, wheelchair and all, just like their love story. 2 weeks, Michael whispered, holding her close. 2 weeks until I get to call you my wife. What Sarah didn't know was that Michael had an incredible surprise planned for their wedding day, one that would make all his extra therapy sessions worthwhile. But for now, he kept that secret close to his heart, counting down the days until he could show her just how far he'd come. The morning of Sarah and Michael's wedding dawned bright and clear. The October sun painted the Atlanta sky in shades of pink and gold, as if nature itself was celebrating their special day. In her bridal suite at the garden venue, Sarah sat in front of a mirror while her sister Jessica carefully arranged her braids with tiny white flowers. Stop fidgeting, Jessica laughed, pinning another flower in place. You're worse than your patience. Sarah couldn't help it. Her stomach was full of butterflies, but they were the good kind. Through the window, she could see guests arriving, following the beautifully decorated wheelchair-accessible paths to their seats. In another room, Michael was getting ready with help from his best friend Tom. His wheelchair had been decorated with small white ribbons, matching the wedding's color scheme. He wore a handsome black tuxedo, specially tailored to look perfect while sitting. Ready for the big moment? Tom asked, adjusting Michael's bow tie. Michael nodded, his hands shaking slightly. More than ready. Is everything set for the surprise? All taken care of, Tom assured him. Dr. Martinez is here, and everything's in place. Back in the bridal suite, Patricia Jenkins walked in and stopped in her tracks. When she saw her daughter in her wedding dress, tears immediately filled her eyes. Oh, baby, she whispered, you look just like an angel. Sarah stood up and hugged her mother carefully, trying not to wrinkle her dress. Thank you, Mama. Thank you for supporting us. I was wrong before, Patricia said, wiping her eyes. Love like yours and Michael's. That's rare and precious. I'm so proud of you both. A knock on the door announced the arrival of Sarah's father's oldest friend, Uncle James, who would walk her down the aisle. Since losing her father 5 years ago, Uncle James had become like a second father to her. It's time, he said softly, offering his arm. The garden looked magical. White chairs lined both sides of a smooth, wide aisle covered in flower petals. Strings of lights hung from tree branches, ready to twinkle when evening came. Most importantly, every detail had been carefully planned to make sure Michael could move easily and be part of every tradition. The music started, a beautiful violin version of At Last. One by one, the bridesmaids walked down the aisle, each carrying a bouquet of yellow daisies. Then Michael entered, moving his wheelchair smoothly down the special path, looking handsome and proud. Finally, it was Sarah's turn. As she appeared at the entrance with Uncle James, everyone stood. Michael felt his breath catch in his throat. She was more beautiful than he had ever imagined, her dress flowing perfectly, her smile brighter than any star. Sarah walked slowly down the aisle, her eyes locked with Michael's. She barely noticed the guests wiping away tears or taking pictures. All she could see was the love of her life waiting for her at the altar. When she reached Michael, she handed her bouquet to Jessica and took both of his hands in hers. The minister began the ceremony, but Sarah and Michael were lost in their own world. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today to witness a love that knows no boundaries, that sees no limitations, and that reminds us all what true devotion means." They had written their own vows. Michael went first, his voice strong and clear. "Sarah, you walked into my hospital room and straight into my heart. You saw me, not my wheelchair. You loved me, not despite my challenges, but including them. I promise to spend every day showing you that love conquers all obstacles." Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke her vows. "Michael, you taught me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being perfect for each other. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your support, and your biggest fan, every single day of our lives." They exchanged rings. Michael's hands, steady now as he slipped the band onto Sarah's finger. Sarah carefully placed Michael's ring on his finger, squeezing his hand gently. "By the power vested in me," the minister said, smiling broadly, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Sarah leaned down, Michael reached up, and their lips met in a perfect kiss. Their guests burst into applause and cheers. But the biggest moment of all was yet to come. Michael's surprise was waiting for the reception, and it would leave everyone, especially Sarah, absolutely speechless. After the beautiful ceremony, the wedding guests moved to the reception area while Sarah and Michael took photos in the garden. What Sarah didn't know was that behind the scenes, an incredible plan was being put into motion. In a private room near the reception hall, Dr. Martinez, Michael's physical therapist, was checking a special pair of leg braces. Tom, the best man, stood guard at the door to make sure Sarah wouldn't accidentally discover anything. For the past year, Michael had been secretly working with Dr. Martinez 3 times a week, preparing for this moment. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Martinez said, carefully examining the advanced medical equipment. "Are you ready, Michael?" Michael nodded, his heart racing with excitement and nervousness. "I've been ready for this moment since the day I proposed." While the secret preparations continued, Sarah was chatting with guests and accepting congratulations. She noticed Michael had disappeared with Tom about 20 minutes ago, but assumed he needed to take care of something personal. After all, they had planned everything carefully to accommodate his needs throughout the day. "Where's Michael?" Jessica asked, bringing Sarah a glass of water. "Tom took him somewhere," Sarah replied. "They said they'd be back soon." Jessica tried to hide her knowing smile. She had been one of the few people trusted with Michael's secret. For months, she had helped cover for him when he needed extra time for therapy sessions, making up excuses to Sarah about why he couldn't meet for lunch or had to reschedule their dates. In the private room, Michael was working with Dr. Martinez and Tom. His face was covered in sweat as they helped him with the special braces. These weren't ordinary medical devices. They were cutting-edge orthotic braces that Michael had been learning to use for months. "Remember," Dr. Martinez instructed, "take it slow. We practiced this hundreds of times." Tom helped Michael remove his suit jacket and put on a special harness that would work with the braces. "Your wife is going to be amazed," he said, grinning. "That's the plan," Michael replied, his voice full of determination. Meanwhile, the reception was in full swing. The DJ played soft background music as guests enjoyed their appetizers. Sarah sat at the beautifully decorated head table, saving Michael's spot next to her. She checked her phone, starting to feel a little worried. "Don't worry," Rachel, Michael's sister, said as she sat down next to Sarah. My brother will be back before you know it. He's just preparing a little something special. Sarah raised her eyebrows. Special? What do you mean? Rachel just smiled mysteriously. You'll see. Back in the private room, Michael was going through his final preparations. Dr. Martinez checked all the straps and connections one last time. The braces were hidden under Michael's pants, making them almost invisible to anyone who didn't know they were there. Remember everything we practiced, Dr. Martinez said encouragingly. And most importantly, remember why you're doing this. Michael thought about Sarah's face when she had first met him in the hospital, how she had seen past his wheelchair to the person inside. He thought about all their dates, their loving moments, and how she had never once made him feel less than whole. I'm ready, he said firmly. Tom stepped out of the room and signaled to the DJ, who nodded in understanding. Everything was set for the big moment that would change everything. As Michael prepared to return to the reception, he took a deep breath. His hands were shaking slightly, but his mind was clear. This surprise had taken months of painful therapy, countless hours of practice, and more determination than anything else he had ever done. Your wife is waiting, Tom said softly, standing ready to help if needed. Michael looked at his reflection in the mirror one last time. In just a few minutes, he would give Sarah the surprise of her life. But more than that, he would show everyone in that room that love truly knows no boundaries. Let's do this, Michael said, his voice steady with determination. The next few minutes would become a moment that none of their wedding guests would ever forget, especially Sarah. Michael's surprise was about to unfold, and it would prove that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected places. The reception hall buzzed with excitement as the DJ's voice came through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the new Mr. and Mrs. Thompson for their first dance. Sarah looked around, confused. Michael had just returned to the reception, and she noticed something different about him. He seemed nervous but determined, his eyes shining with a secret. Tom stood close behind his wheelchair, and Dr. Martinez, whom Sarah recognized from Michael's therapy sessions, stood nearby. Michael, what's going on? Sarah asked softly. Michael took her hand and squeezed it gently. Sarah, my love, I have something to show you. For the past year, I've been keeping a secret. The crowd grew quiet as Michael nodded to Tom. Sarah watched, her heart beating fast, as Tom and Dr. Martinez moved to either side of Michael's wheelchair. The opening notes of At Last began to play their song. Baby, Michael said, looking up at his new wife, I wanted to give you something special for our wedding day. Then something incredible happened. Michael pressed the brakes on his wheelchair and slowly, carefully, began to move. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth as she watched her husband grip the armrests of his wheelchair. Oh my God, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. With support from the special braces hidden under his pants and months of secret practice, Michael began to stand up. The room gasped collectively. Patricia Jenkins grabbed Jessica's hand, both of them crying openly. Rachel, Michael's sister, was already recording everything on her phone, her hands shaking with emotion. I wanted to share our first dance, Michael said, his voice trembling slightly as he stood upright, standing with you, just this once. Sarah couldn't speak. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she watched her husband stand before her, something she had never expected to see. The braces gleamed slightly at his ankles, visible only if you knew to look for them. Dr. Martinez moved forward. It's okay, Sarah. We practiced this many times. The braces will help him stay stable. Michael held out his hand to his bride. May I have this dance, Mrs. Thompson? Sarah stepped forward, carefully placing one hand in his and the other on his shoulder, mindful of his balance. Together, they began to sway gently to the music. The crowd watched in awe as the couple shared their first dance, both standing. This is why you've been so busy, Sarah said through her tears. All those extra therapy sessions. Michael nodded, concentrating on his movements but smiling broadly. Every muscle ache, every extra hour of practice, it was all for this moment. To share one dance with you, standing face to face. Around them, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Guests who had wondered about their relationship, would question how it would work, now saw the depth of their love displayed in this incredible moment. I can't believe you did this, Sarah whispered, looking into his eyes. You amazing, wonderful man. You've supported me through everything, Michael replied. You never saw my wheelchair as a barrier. I wanted to show everyone what I see when I'm with you, that anything is possible with love. They danced for 3 beautiful minutes. Michael's movements were careful and limited, but to Sarah, it was the most perfect dance she had ever experienced. As the song came to an end, Tom and Dr. Martinez helped Michael back into his wheelchair. The room erupted in applause and cheers. Sarah knelt beside Michael's wheelchair and kissed him deeply, not caring about her dress or the mascara running down her cheeks. "I love you so much," she said, holding his face in her hands. "I love you too," Michael replied, wiping away her tears. "And Sarah? This doesn't change anything. I'm still me, still in my wheelchair. I just wanted to give you this one magical moment." Sarah shook her head, smiling through her tears. "Every moment with you is magical, standing or sitting. But this is a moment I'll never forget." As their guests surrounded them with congratulations and amazement, Sarah and Michael held hands tightly. Their love story had just added another extraordinary chapter, proving that with determination, love, and a little bit of magic, anything was possible. The morning after their wedding, Sarah and Michael sat on the balcony of their hotel room, watching the sunrise together. Their magical first dance had become the talk of the town, with videos already spreading among their friends and family. But for them, it was just the beginning of their journey together. "So," Sarah said, sipping her coffee, "that's why you kept disappearing for all those extra therapy sessions." Michael laughed, holding her free hand. "I wanted it to be perfect. You should have seen me the first time I tried those braces. I fell so many times. Dr. Martinez thought I was going to give up." "But you didn't," Sarah said softly, squeezing his hand. "No, I didn't. Every time I wanted to quit, I thought about your face when you'd see me stand. That kept me going." Later that afternoon, as they prepared for their honeymoon flight to Hawaii, Michael's phone rang. It was Dr. Martinez. "Michael," the doctor said excitedly, "I just got approved for a new research program. Those braces you used at the wedding? We're getting funding to develop them further. Would you be interested in being part of the study?" Michael looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "Absolutely," he replied. "But not just as a patient. I want to help develop the software for them. Maybe we can make them more affordable for others." Sarah watched her husband's eyes light up as he talked about the project. This was the man she fell in love with, always thinking about how to help others, never letting challenges stop him. A week later, they were sitting on a beautiful Hawaiian beach. The resort had special beach wheelchairs that could move easily on the sand, allowing them to enjoy the ocean together. Sarah sat beside Michael's chair, both of them watching the sunset. "You know," Sarah said, playing with her wedding ring, "some of my colleagues at the hospital asked me if things would be different now, after seeing you stand at the wedding." Michael turned to look at her. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them that I didn't marry you because I was waiting for you to stand up. I married you because you stand up for what's right, for what you believe in, for the people you love. And you do that every single day, whether you're in your wheelchair or not." Michael's eyes filled with tears as he reached for her hand. "How did I get so lucky?" "I'm the lucky one," Sarah replied. "You showed me what real strength looks like. It's not about physical abilities, it's about the strength of your heart." That evening, during dinner at their beachfront restaurant, they talked about their future plans. Michael shared his ideas for developing more accessible technology, while Sarah discussed her dream of opening a rehabilitation center that would focus on both physical and emotional healing. "We could do it together," Michael suggested. "Your medical knowledge, my tech skills, we could help so many people." Sarah's face lit up. "Mr. Thompson, are you suggesting we become business partners too?" "Why not? We're already partners in everything else," he replied with a grin. As they finished their dinner, a small band began playing at last, their song. Sarah looked at Michael, remembering their magical first dance. "May I have this dance?" she asked, moving to sit in his lap. Together, they swayed in his wheelchair on the restaurant's deck, the Hawaiian sunset painting the sky in beautiful colors. Other diners watched the happy couple, seeing not a woman dancing with a man in a wheelchair, but two people deeply in love. "You know," Michael whispered in her ear, "standing up for our first dance was amazing, but this, just being here with you, this is perfect too." Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. "Every dance with you is perfect, Michael Thompson." As the sun set on their first week as husband and wife, Both Sarah and Michael knew that their story was more than just about a magical wedding dance. It was about two people who saw past society's limitations, who chose love over fear, and who proved that true partnership means supporting each other's dreams, no matter what form they take. Their journey was just beginning, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together, as equals, as partners, as best friends, and as soulmates who had found each other against all odds.